really good to see everybody. I will get started. Thank you all for joining us for our first Micro Enterprise Mini-Symposium. This is really intended to give you kind of a warm-up or a taste of what the Micro Enterprise Symposium is that we hold every year in October. We wanted to create a space where people who haven't had the opportunity to experience the Micro Enterprise Symposium could kind of see what it's all about. We've been holding it for the last 3 years. We'll be holding it again this October. And it's really focused on creating value for the smallest of businesses. So this is businesses really with pretty much 5 employees or less. And it's a half-day symposium intended to allow you to walk away from that half day with actionable insights that you can take back for your business. So today's topic is on innovation through change. We're shortening up our discussions to just 10 or 12 minutes per person here. And each of our speakers is going to speak a little bit on how they have innovated through change in their own business. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for a Q&A at the end. You will be able to type into the chat to each of the co-hosts, each of the speakers, or to myself, Carlton, or Ginger to share any questions that you might have. Or we will open it up to actual discussion. So you can also just speak out at the end when we unmute everybody. So definitely get out a notebook. I'm hoping you're going to hear, I know you're going to hear a lot of value today, and that there will be some things that will be something that you can implement in your own business today that's going to be of value. So we're going to start this morning by first, I want to thank Brandi, Miles, and Brian for being here today and for sharing your stories. And I'm really excited to hear from each of you. So Brandi, would you like to start with your story?
So I'm Brandi Norrell. I am the owner of Studio Luxe. It is the premier women's boutique here in Old Town Warrenton. I see lots of familiar faces, but I know there's some of you that I have not had an opportunity to meet in person yet. One of the biggest things, I opened in October 2019. I opened in 20 days. And shortly after, we all know, the effects of COVID started. So in March, I closed for 80 days. And then when I came back, I kind of had to hit the ground running. From day one, I showed up as my most authentic self. And I think that allowed me to continue to be flexible because I could unapologetically be me and create a space that was warm, welcoming, and inviting, and something that made sense not just for me, but for everybody in the community. Whether you're male, female, young, old, in between, it was a safe place that was flexible, whether it was in conversation or the offerings that we had at the boutique. Additionally, I really got involved. That allowed me to be flexible, whether that was most recently joining the EOTW board, being a part of some of the conversations and panels and different things that the Mason Enterprise office offered, as well as working some with the chamber, and really just getting out and about in the community, not only to hear the needs, but understand them. That allowed me to pivot in my business to know what to do best to move forward. When I initially reopened in May, I heard all the things that people were saying about safety and concerns and different things like that. And I really heard that, and I began to offer private shopping experiences where people could make a one-on-one appointments where they could come in. And it could just be a one-on-one experience. I heard and understood that people wanted, although they couldn't get out, they wanted to get out with their family and friends in small groups. So I began hosting private sip-in shops for everyone to come out, and not just to shop, but to commune and gather, to have conversation in a safe place in a small setting. Those things have continued. With events being canceled and rescheduled, even still now, one of the other services that I began to offer is personalized shopping, where I'm ordering for them and they can come in and say, this is exactly what I need. And I have things for them to try on, and they don't have to go to 7 stores, and they don't have to, I do the shopping for them. And so they're able to have that personalized one-on-one experience that allows them to cater to their needs. And it's the best of both worlds. They get what they came for, as well as they didn't have to do all of the legwork and go to all of these different places in order to do that. So most of the flexibility comes down to hearing, understanding, and then implementing what it is that the community is saying that they want and need. And it all came down to me being okay being in front of my business and going out and doing the meeting and the talking and partnering and collaborating with other businesses and kind of getting out of my bubble. Studio Luxe is on a side street. So it really requires me to put my feet on the ground and to go into these other businesses. I've also done a lot of social media, I won't say promotion, more so collaboration with other businesses. And that was a lot of the flexibility, is figuring out how we could help each other in order to grow. And not just grow, but to also just kind of keep the doors open for a period of time, not just for myself, but other doors and other businesses there in Old Town. So whether that's going into these businesses, and not just in Old Town, just period in Warrenton, or going to the farmers market, and just understanding that business is not just inside the walls of Studio Luxe, but it's actually far past and beyond that. So I would say that's probably a snapshot of what it looks like to be flexible in this time in terms of business in my field.
Wonderful. So you said you reopened in May. What I've heard so far is be your authentic self.
Yes, absolutely.
Get involved in the community to hear the needs and understand them.
Absolutely.
And then be flexible so that you can implement what the community needs.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I would have to say, I think that you've succeeded at all three.
Thank you.
But considering I shop at your shop and I love it, I'm pretty biased.
And then really just being open to the feedback. I think that's the biggest thing. There's no one size fits all approach to business. Being able to grow and to learn is going to be a constant thing. I think the biggest part of a pivot is just that, being prepared at all times to make the change when needed. Some of those changes we can see and we know that it's coming, and other things are unpredictable and we have no control over them, and we just kind of have to take the bull by the horns and go.
Right. Good. I have a question for you
Sure.
around that being open to feedback, but I'm going to save it to the end.
Okay.
For the Q&A. So that means that we're going to move on now to Miles. And Miles, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've been innovating through change?
Well, again, Miles Friedman, and for almost 8 years, I was Director of Economic Development in Fauquier County. So I know many of you, see a lot of good friends here, either live or they're very good touched up pictures. And my career has been almost constant change, and it's been very positive. So just to talk a little bit about my own journey, for 25 years, I actually headed a fairly large nonprofit in DC, a national group. And one of the things we learned very quickly is to reinvent ourselves on a regular basis. So that's my first piece of advice for small businesses. In this day and age, you can't just wait for tragedy and pandemics to reinvent. You need to reinvent yourself every few years, because otherwise your products and services get a little stale. Your thinking gets a little bit, codified. You say you think the same way, and then you don't do the other thing, which I want to advise, which is to think outside the box. We hear that all the time. But I knew that I was viewed as somebody who does early on, when I was at a meeting with my then boss, Katie Heritage, and the facilitator said, most of you are probably, you're in government, so you may be doing the same thing all the time, but some of you may be envelope pushers. And my boss started waving her arms and pointing at me. And I thought, oh, good, I am pushing the envelope. So, thinking outside the box, thinking differently, not being afraid to be a little daring is another piece of advice. I've had to reinvent myself a number of times. After 25 years at a very comfortable job where we were doing exciting work and where our business was changing every 2 or 3 years, I sort of wanted to get out of the association business and retired from that job and became a consultant. And I was a solo consultant. I had a great network nationwide. I had contracts waiting for me when I left, which made the transition a lot easier. But of course, I had to think very differently. Now, number one, I was helping people not as their association director, but as a consultant, which, consultants have a certain reputation, not always a good one, but generally one of being helpful. And trying to be helpful, even when it was controversial, was sometimes kind of exciting. I enjoyed being a lone wolf. I liked to, economic developers are not generally viewed as the most exciting people in the world, but I saw myself as the James Bond of economic development. And except for the good looks, the expensive suits, and the license to kill, I felt, pretty good about that whole self-impression. But it required that kind of confidence to go all over the country, go into strange places and say, here's what you really should be doing. So, that for me was an innovation from a very safe, very comfortable job for many years. Then I changed jobs again and applied for the job here in Fauquier County, a job which I loved completely. I mean, I spent almost eight wonderful years with the county. I had the best team you could possibly have. So I had to adjust from being a lone wolf, doing whatever I wanted, making all the decisions, to having to be told, no, this is government, you can't do that. And having to take that graciously and work around it. Not that there's anything wrong with government, but those of you who've been both in the private sector and in government know it, things work very differently. The thing that I embraced was the help from my team, one of whom is on the call, Laura Torpy. I've been all over the country, been to 49 of the 50 states, and I have to say, I had the best team of economic developers working with me of any I've seen anywhere in the United States. And, that was another change for me, from being a lone wolf to having to really put myself in the hands of a team that I trusted. And yet we were being innovative. I was hired to do things differently in Fauquier County. And so going into the county and saying, well, this is how you've always done things, but obviously you're not completely satisfied or you wouldn't have hired me. And so we were thinking of different things. We started business incubators, which many of you are very familiar with, and which Rini, among others, has worked miracles with the incubator accelerators. 3 of them we now have. That was different. And the innovation came because I knew that small businesses and entrepreneurs needed a long range of help, one of which was a place to call home, to hang their hat, to have their machines and their internet. Anybody who's lived long in Fauquier County knows what it's like looking for fast speed internet, right? And if you're a small growing business, you can't live without it. So we knew what their needs were. We had to find a new way for them to get access to that, to free help, and to other things they needed to be successful. So again, we thought that was kind of innovative, and we had a lot of support from the chamber in that. And that's something I will never forget, because the chamber played a big role in helping us to get the board to make controversial decisions and allocate lots of money to help small businesses. Well, then, after almost 8 years here, I sort of realized that one thing I missed about being a consultant was the travel and seeing new places and meeting new people and seeing a wide range of challenges that I could help with. So I went back into consulting, and I made another big change. I took on a partner who's also on the program today. Because for one thing, one of the things I love about working with people is bouncing ideas around and having different expertise. And you can sit with the same client and there's 3 of you and you hear 3 different things from the client. I also knew that there were some holes in my expertise in economic development, which most consultants don't like to admit, including me. But I found a partner who could match my skills and bring closure to me in terms of the holes in my resume. And that's worked really well. But again, that was, for me, an innovation because, now I'm responsible to somebody besides myself when I make decisions and when I want to make decisions. So that's a change. The other change is we then got recruited by a larger consulting firm, a fairly new one, started by a former high executive in an internationally known business who knows a lot about business but knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. And so he brought us in as entrepreneurs to help keep that business solvent and to do innovative things that he might not have thought of himself. And that was the point where I thought one of the things I want to do is to address a lifelong passion of mine, which is helping small businesses even more than I do, and helping small communities. You know, your community can only be a source of support, and I'm talking about government now and government's agencies and partners and so forth, if they have resources. And although Fauquier does not, you know, have an overwhelming amount of resources, there are many communities with far less money to spend and challenges just as big. So throughout my whole career, the quote unquote biggest innovation I wanted to achieve was to find a way to help small companies and small cities and counties, especially in rural areas. And I've done work in areas where I've done work in communities out west that make Fauquier County look like New York City. So, you know, where do you find resources? Where do businesses go for help? And if there are no resources, some of those communities are literally dying. And I got to say that when Michelle and I approached the leaders of the company, which had about 12 or 15 senior economic developers, the universal response was, it can't be done. Forget about it. They have no resources, which is sad, but we're not a nonprofit. We're not a charity. We have to get paid if we're going to survive. Well, both of us have the same attitude. Try telling us it can't be done. And it's being done. We have come up with a plan. We've put a lot of work into it. We have several clients already, and the list is growing. And now, you know, now what we're depending on is proof of concept. If it works and the communities get help and we don't go broke doing it, it will have succeeded. But I consider that to be a major innovation and a contribution to our economic development as a profession, and a contribution to small communities who are wise enough to bring us in as their outsourced economic development. So to sort of summarize, I would say the last piece of advice was get help. There is help available. We all need it. None of us know everything. None of us have all the answers. As I said, consultants like to think they do. I've often told clients that I did. They soon found out otherwise. We need help, and there's help. Here we've got a great community college. We've got a great small business development center. You've got a terrific chamber that can help steer you. If they can't help you, they can steer you to help. You've got a micro enterprise council, one of the first in the country. You've got resources. You've got big companies and medium-sized companies that will help. Don't be afraid to ask for it, because it won't come to you. You've got to go out and find it and press them. Press all those resources to help you with what you need. And I'll end by telling you a quick story about, to me, the proof that everybody needs help. One of the biggest companies in the world, Pepsi, and Michelle knows the story that's coming, huge company, billions of dollars, one of the greatest marketing machines I've ever seen. And if you're old enough, you might remember their slogan, Pepsi helps bring things alive, helps make things come alive, you know. And, you know, the commercial showed people celebrating, drinking Pepsi, playing basketball and drinking Pepsi, having bar mitzvahs and drinking Pepsi, you know, everything you can imagine with smiling people. They mounted a big campaign in Japan where they'd gotten pretty good information that the Japanese love sweet cola drinks. The little glitch they ran into was their slogan, because in Japanese, their slogan translated as follows: Pepsi will bring your ancestors back from the dead. They should have asked for some help before they used that slogan in a foreign language. So we all need it. There's help available. Don't be shy. So reinvent yourself, think outside the box, and take whatever help you can find. Thank you.
Thanks, Miles. You just summarized the whole thing, so I can't even summarize it for you, but I definitely have jotted a ton of notes, and we'll have questions for you toward the end. So next up, we have Brian of Barrel Oak Winery. And Brian, you too have an amazing story to share, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. It's great to see all of you. Some are friends I haven't seen in a while. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Michelle, I want to thank you for doing this. I know others have been involved in this. You know, microbusiness was really our focus at the Greater Warrenton Chamber. And when the time came that we merged, you were the person more than anyone who brought that focus across to the Fauquier Chamber. And that's why this is happening. and I'm just honored to be your friend and to be here today. So I thought, boy, I've been listening and just hearing some things that so resonate with my experience at Barrel Oak, and I jotted down some notes, and I'm going to draw upon those to try and, if I can, give a framework that may be useful in this discussion of things like being flexible and innovative, networking, getting out in the community, thinking outside the box, reinventing yourself. These are all themes with which I've been forced to be familiar over the last 15 or so years. And so I thought I'd share a couple thoughts with you today. So it's my understanding that it was Machiavelli who said that entrepreneurs are simply those who understand that there is little difference between obstacle and opportunity and are able to turn both to their advantage. And so that's really kind of what I want to focus on and give a framework to try and explain what I think that looks like. Over the years, people have come into Barrel Oak and repeatedly asked me how they can successfully open and operate their business. And most have been wanting to get into the wine and the vineyard business, but some just wanted to go out and build their businesses. And so these have been just dozens and dozens of conversations over the years. And in those conversations, it's really become clear to me that there are, in fact, a lot of obstacles to running a successful business, to opening and operating a successful business. And yet it does mean that there are also incredible opportunities. And fortunately, in my life, I've been in a position, for whatever reason, to see obstacles as opportunities. It's partially to my mindset, for whatever reason. And I've had resources I've been able to draw upon that have assisted me at times when I dug myself a fairly deep hole, pursuing my dreams. I think the challenge is to understand how to recognize and take advantage of the link between the two sides of this opportunity and obstacles coin. So I want to offer up an analogy that may help with this. There are other ones available, but here's the one I want to put up, which is fine. And I apologize if any of you are familiar with this analogy, but in flight, to be successful, there are four forces, and these forces both work against each other and they work closely in unison in order to achieve flight. And those forces are lift, thrust, drag, and weight. So how does that relate to us as business owners? Well, lift, I think, is the belief in what it is that we can accomplish as individuals with a dream, looking to build and create our business. The real question then is, how do we deal with contingency, or what Don Rumsfeld called the unknown unknowns of owning a business? One of the advantages of being an employee, that check's there a couple times a month. Whether or not you hate your job or not, that insurance hopefully is there too. So when you own a business, that isn't necessarily the case. And so what mitigates those exposures and those risks? Well, in my view, as Miles and Brandi have spoken about, a lot of it has to do with gathering knowledge, being prepared to improvise in a way that allows you to take some of that risk out. And that's a big part of it, but it's not all of it. Really what's important, and I think Brandi really got to this, is developing relationships and alliances in your community, which can further reduce your exposure and provide credibility, especially when you really need it. Going out of your way to do the right thing, even though it's hard sometimes, is just an underrated component of success as a person and as a business. And a way to boil it all down is, and I'm surprised, I call it the 2%. 2% of people out there, whether they're customers or business owners, they don't get it. And that's just the reality. So maybe that's limited, hopefully, to those 2%. But the reality is that if you ever take advantage of even a single person, you're taking advantage of everybody and you're short shifting yourself, because the word's going to get out. And while the customer, I've learned years ago in the restaurant business, I used to say the customer is always king, but I know that's not the case. And that's a really pithy reduction that doesn't really apply. So while the customer isn't king, trying to always do the right thing for your customer is a necessity. And there's a difference between those two things, because we have to recognize that some people are just wrong or worse. But overall, people are great. They're just looking for someone who can help them, whether it's a product or a service. And to the degree that we're trying always to provide in an honest and accountable way, that product or service, I think that a lot of success comes from that. And as a result, sometimes things cost us a little bit more dearly, trying to make things right. But that often leads to greater opportunity down the road. And I think that's part of the success of Barrel Oak over the years. So the next item that we have to be aware of in this analogy is thrust. And thrust is the often seemingly unlimited time and energy that we put into our business. Once we make that commitment, as we all know, it just never ends. And it's hours and hours and more hours and more hours and sacrifices and more hours and more sacrifices. And there are many reasons why we open up our respective businesses. For me, it was what I called living the dream. You know, here I am 15 years later, and I can honestly say that I'm living my dream still. But it looks a lot different than what I expected 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago when I first started down this path. You know, put another way, the thrust of my efforts have led to a very different place than I originally imagined. And I imagined a lot when I was starting this. You know, my takeaway is also tying into what Miles and Brandi were saying, is that it's useful to be flexible in your business development and engaging its progress. You know, recognizing opportunities that you didn't anticipate and not fearing where they can lead you, I think is important. I started out with a plan, but I've modified it over time. And COVID is the most recent forced modification, but there have been others. So to the degree that you've got a vision, which I'm going to get to in a second, you know, that guides you, still having that flexibility is key. You know, so the next part of successful flight is drag. And that may sound like a negative, but it's actually kind of the balance to our passion. And it's not a negative, provided that it's accounted for. If you don't account for the drag that's going to be there, it can really overwhelm you. But the trick is to recognize that there's always going to be this force of drag. And, you know, it's kind of the reality check that's constantly there. You know, and it's something you've got to do constantly in order to see where you're headed and where you're willing to go. You know, a business can take us places we don't want to go to. If it's successful, it's a very powerful force. And you can, as the owner, you can always be guiding it and trying to fashion it where you want to go. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. So I think you need to accept the drag of circumstance to some degree, because if not, it's going to probably chew you up. And you got to be strong and prepared for that. You got to be resilient. You got to have every morning, you know, ready to move forward with the new reality that you face. And I think this is probably to some degree the reality that we've all faced since COVID came along on March 12th, I think it was, of last year. I sat down with my team that day or the day before the day after. I told them we were closing Barrel Oak and I didn't know if we'd ever open again. But I also had worked out a plan for 3 nights in a row, getting up at about 1 o'clock in the morning for what that could look like with the goal of surviving COVID. So this morning, in fact, I was up at 1:30. I don't know why, but there was just crap going through my head and couldn't get back to sleep. So there I was. That's the joy of owning a business. And something that's been really interesting, because there are always going to be surprises thrown in that drag box, is that over the past month, I've been learning that reopening is a lot more challenging than closing. Closing was emotionally incredibly challenged for me. And, you know, I'm sure that we all had that experience, the fear of all of that. But reopening, the rapidity, the changing environment that I'm in, it's proof. That's why I'm getting up at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning again. It's the 3rd time this week, because I'm just trying to keep up with what it looks like, knowing that my perception of what this is very different than the perception of many of my staff, many of my guests. So how do I anticipate and try and be ready for what that means when people come to the door with a set of expectations that don't necessarily match with the requirements of my business or with my ability to meet their expectations? It's a very challenging time. Final factor is weight. And I'd like to suggest that weight comes from the limits that we encounter along the way of building our successful business. In many ways, we carry, you know, this weight every moment as a business owner. The moments that I think people think are part of my life, where I'm sitting drinking fine wine, looking out over the vineyards of my friends, you know, they're surprisingly few and far between. I had some really good friends on this call, And I don't think I've ever done that with any of you. And it's not because I don't want to. I really do. But, you know, that dream, which, yes, I mean, as a kid in California, going off to the wineries and the vineyards and then watching the movies, you know, that looks great. Doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's awesome. You know, I think part of the secret is to constantly learn and embrace that there are new facts and inputs coming at us all the time, so that we can be gaining resources and insights that will lift this weight from our shoulders. You know, because I feel it's there all the time as an employer, as a father, a husband responsible for my family's welfare. I feel that weight more than I expected 15, 16, 17 years ago. So preparation and research and all these other things I've been talking about are things can help to lift that weight off our shoulders, I think. You know, I think all of you understand this because you're on the Zoom call, right? I mean, what's the reason for being on this call? We're trying to find solutions. We're trying to find ways to grow our businesses, to make them successful, to serve, in many instances, others. Looking at my dear friend Marianne, and I know that she's not the only one, but that's very much a part of the life that she lives. You know, you got to check in with yourself to understand and acknowledge and care for your own boundaries and limitations. And that's kind of where I'm going to start winding up here. You know, we can all burn out. I did about 7 years ago, you know, and it led to some real life changes in my life. A lot of folks know, you know, some of these were really good and some were more difficult, you know, divorce, injury, weight gain, suicidal thoughts, and a lot more gray hair were all part of the package for me. Different for everybody, but those are all part of the package for me. But also, it led to my new life partner and wife and our son Atticus, who's now 3.5, and the greatest gift that I never could imagine. Talk about that journey 17 years ago. It's led me to a place of greater joy than I could ever imagine. No, it's not direct to my business, but I found my life partner through my business and some serendipity, and that led to everything else that I'm so grateful for. It's different for all of us, but it's the same for all of us in some ways. And, you know, through all of it, I have also found a renewed passion for my business. And I'm grateful for that. So to wrap up, you know, you can pick your metaphor. You know, I threw out there flight to try and get at some of these issues. I picked it because years ago, I was in a fellowship in New York City, and this was one of the metaphors they presented. At that time, I'm thinking, oh, this is how to be effective. That's the way it was presented. But it really does apply, because I kind of integrated it to apply in other ways. So today, as I was trying to think about what I could share with all of you, I picked flight because it's something I'm familiar with. I studied it. Not to fly, but to try and learn how to be effective and successful in life. So you have your own core organizing principles. You have your own core organizing metaphors. I think what matters is that to be successful in business, you really got to kind of stay true to who you are. Whatever your metaphor, your organizing principles, know where you want to end up, be flexible, stay focused on the opportunities, and acknowledge that they're the flip side of the obstacles so that you can grab those opportunities in the obstacles you encounter. And then just to the degree you can, enjoy the reward of being your own boss, whether you have just you as an employee and you're trying to make sure the money's there to pay the mortgage, or you've got 1 or 2 or 3 or 20 or 30 or 50 people working for you. So I think that's it. Thank you so much today for letting me say a couple things, and looking forward to any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. Again, a ton of notes. You know, really, I've had the privilege of knowing Brian and Miles for several years, and to be able to follow along with their journey. Brandi, I'm thrilled that you're in part of Warrenton and part of the chamber, and that I've been able to get to know you a little bit. And I really am looking forward to years from now, us being able to sit down with Brian and Miles and a glass of wine and talk about where we were, you know, years ago, and we had this session and we talked about all these great principles. We do have a very rich community here in Fauquier of small business owners who are open-hearted and willing to help each other and to collaborate. So I really want to encourage each of you that's on the call to reach out to each other, to encourage each other, to take that time to get to know each other, because my richest experiences in being a business owner over here in Fauquier over the last 10 years, my richest experiences truly have been the relationships that I have built with so many of you that are on this call and elsewhere in the community. Getting involved here was one of the best things that I ever did. One of the most fulfilling things that I have done. And that's why I'm so passionate about this county and so passionate about small business here. So I have a couple of questions. I also want to open it up for questions for the rest of you. I'll start off with a couple of questions. And actually my first question is for both Brian and Brandi, because each of you touched on it. And it has to do with kind of reopening and the way everyone is kind of at a different level with this right now, different comfort level. And this really applies whether you're in retail or you're in consulting. So, you know, Miles, you may want to speak up on this as well. How are you accommodating for the different levels of comfort for people? And either of you can
Please,
start.
Brandi, please.
Anybody can start.
For me, I just kind of meet them where they are, whatever their needs are. And whether that's opening early or staying late, providing one-on-one services, or, you know, if they're comfortable in group setting, offering curbside pickup, doing pop-up locations. That's one of the things that have come with the pivot is, you know, bringing the business outside of the walls of the business in addition to collaboration. So whether that's me at the farmer's market or at a local brewery or a local winery, we're a little bit of everywhere. So then that way we can meet our clients and our customers where they are. So if they're not comfortable coming in, we're going to go to them. We've also done some at-home appointments where we're doing closet consults and, again, private shopping. We're doing doorstep delivery, and just whatever the needs are, we're filling the gap.
Very cool. Could you have anticipated your business doing that if this had not happened?
I anticipated some of it. These are some of the things that were projections for, you know, a year out once, you know, however, it came immediately. And that was just part of the flexibility. That was the difference between not just having a business and saying that I had a business and keeping the business going. I think any business owner that closed for any period of time, whether it was 1 day, 80 days, 120 days, that was the requirement, is to just keep going and to constantly be open to the change and meeting the needs.
Yeah, and I think that that applies to any difficulty that you have in business, right? Because I mean, this is about so much more than just the pandemic that we all went through, right? I mean, no matter what, you just keep going, you just keep moving forward, because there's always going to be some sort of crisis or some sort of fire to put out. It's just part of entrepreneurship.
Right. And now this is just part of business. This is just part of everyday business. It doesn't seem odd or normal, and you just get in front of it and you keep going. Some days you, like he said, you're up in the middle of the night with the thoughts where you're like, okay, what's the next step? And other days it's just run of the mill. It's business as usual, because this is business as usual now.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And you continue to raise the bar on yourself. So.
Miles, Brian?
I've got about 50 folks that work for me, about 12 or so full-time, the rest part-time. And when COVID hit, I said, first job is for us to take care of our team, and in doing that, we'll take care of our guests. So I've been pretty cautious throughout. Part of it too is that I'm managing a very big operation in terms of the number of people that come here. So we've actually in many ways had to be more restrictive throughout this process than probably was required of us. because if we didn't, we felt like it would spin out of control very quickly, because the lowest common denominator would be doing things that would really be, you know, not something that other people were comfortable with. And I was worried I was going to lose my business if we didn't really maintain a sense of safety. In fact, we shifted our motto from great wine wrapped in great experience to the safety you need or seek, depending upon what the material was, the wine you love, the experience you love, because we're focused on experience, of course. So reopening has been a huge challenge for us, because I'm generally trying to hold back the cart. I feel like there's this really heavy wheelbarrow full of stones, and I'm going downhill, and it's getting harder and harder to keep from, you know, either going on my face or letting go. And I am worried about, not worried, it's not maybe the word, but I do have a lot of concern about letting go, and then maybe finding out that that wasn't the right thing to do quite yet. So Brandi's right. We're trying to meet our customers where they are psychologically and emotionally. In our case, we're physically in one spot. I think it's really innovative to be going to other places. We found years ago that really 99% of what we do well happens here at Barrel Oak, not at other locations per se. We do that occasionally. So just really trying to see where our guests are. And our core, the way that we've kind of done our analogy, what Brandi's talking about, I think, is that we've tried to create a different things that people can partake in. Some are more built around caution and security, and others are built around a little bit less caution and security. And with the reopening, we're really having to think that through yet again. And we're being blindsided in some ways by how quickly this has happened. But I think the trick is to have, to the degree that you're trying to deal with this and you're dealing with a public like we do, trying to have, like, it's almost like a product line, but it's actually a service line. Here's the way you can come in and do a tasting, but it's going to be very controlled. Everybody else, you're going to get flights. So we're not having one-on-one prolonged interaction with you across the table for a prolonged period of time. You know, here's the way you can come in and just kind of have your own place way off to the side, come buy a bottle and not have to deal with anybody. And we're doing all those simultaneously. And the challenge for us is, how do you staff that? How do you manage that? You know, how do you prepare for that so that everything that has to be in place to make that work, right down to documents that explain what we're doing for certain people, which is different than other people. All those things are in place. The website updates are constant as a result. And so it's been a really interesting ride over the last month. Just part of riding the wave, which is what we've been doing from the beginning.
Right. Very cool. They're also very customer centric, and just being able to flex and flow with whatever comfort level anyone is at on any particular day, I think is really important.
I would double down on something that both Brandi and Brian talked about, which is listen to your customers. You can't come up with a plan for reopening or rebounding or becoming more viable, you know, and impervious to these disasters just in your own head, or even by talking to people like you. And so, you know, in our business, you know, we go into communities and want to help them start new things and do this and do that. And right now they're all saying, whoa, wait, we got to figure out what to do about COVID. That's still affecting everything we do. And the wild card for us is the American Rescue Plan. Suddenly there are small communities getting millions of dollars from this program, and most of them don't have a clue what to do with it. And they say, we want to help our people, we want to help our businesses, but we don't know what to do or how to do it, and we don't want to waste it or miss the opportunity. So we're having to pay very close attention to our customers. And I think, you know, Brandi, you really are responding to your customers. I think that's great. Brian's always been about that. So I just emphasize how much I agree with that point.
If I can just real quick, adding on to that, COVID broke our business model. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I see heads shaking. I think across the board for many, many people, this lies at the heart of COVID's impact upon that coin, that two-sided coin of opportunity and, you know, challenge. And the trick is, yes, to try and recognize that. But I think that to the degree that as a good business owner, we're trying to understand the psychology of our clientele. Where are they mentally, psychologically, emotionally? For Miles, it's recognizing that there are these people out there with all this money who don't know what to do with it, but they want to do the right thing. For me, it's recognizing that people are coming through the door with different values, different perceptions, even of reality that is influencing how they're approaching being in a herd environment, right? And getting out and getting an experience that they desire and seek after not having it for so long. I think that's a big part of it, understanding where your clients are emotionally and psychologically, and then recognizing that your business model, it may not ever be what it was before. And that, what's the opportunity behind that? What can you do with that to grow and succeed, as opposed to contract and, hunker down?
Absolutely. I'd love to open up the questions to everybody else. I don't know if we can unmute everybody so that people are able to ask questions, or you can type in the chat if you'd like. I do have one more question, but I wanted to make sure I open it up to the group.
Everyone should have the ability to unmute themselves at this point.
Great, thank you, Ginger.
Yes, ma'am.
Carlton looks frozen.
He does look frozen, actually.
He's in deep thought.
Oh, there he is.
He just got back.
Unfrozen. I actually, Michelle, I don't actually have a question, but I will tell you two things that I really want to reiterate, though. One thing that Miles said is ask for help. Look at the amount of resources that you have on this call right here. Laura Torpy with Economic Development, Charity with Experience Old Town Warrenton, Rini with the Mason Enterprise Center. You have resources right here, the Chamber, the Micro Enterprise Council at the Chamber. You have resources right here to reach out. And again, those of you who've heard me talk about this is, COVID is, we're still looking for silver linings of COVID, and we try and find them regularly. It's forced us to really collaborate better for the common good here in our own community. Even our resources are all working together better and more collaboratively. So definitely reach out. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the things that Brian said about drag and weight and being prepared for those things. It's like, you are building your entrepreneurial muscles by preparing yourself for drag and weight. And very infrequently do you hear entrepreneurs speak about things like that. So I'm really glad that Brian brought it up, because being prepared for those curveballs makes them much more hittable.
Give the Nationals that advice, if you would.
Yeah, no kidding, Miles.
I knew baseball was going to come up with it at some point.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
Yeah. Jumping off of that, one of the goals of the Micro Enterprise Council that we were able to achieve a couple of years ago was the creation of a resource guide for resources here in the county. I took a quick look around the office here, and I don't see one on the shelf, but I know that they are available here at the Chamber office. And it's a guide, hold it in your hands, guide with names and addresses and overview of each organization here in the county that's available to help you drive your business forward. So if you're interested in having one, please feel free to stop by the Chamber office and get it. You may give Carlton a quick ring first so that he knows you're coming and he can open the door to let you in. I don't know what I apologize. I don't know what the rules are here at the Path Resource Center right now as far as engaging and coming in and out, but definitely we want to accommodate you and get those resources to you that you need.
Resources I like to throw out there, if I can, Michelle, real quick. I'm always happy to sit down with anybody and just talk. I'm before happy to do it again on any issue that you're trying to struggle with and work through, or Zoom. Also, I do want to tell folks about it. It's a pitch for a friend, but he's got a wonderful program. Dennis Taylor's Paradigm Solutions provides an incredibly innovative program for entrepreneurs to try and understand the mechanics of developing, operating, and successfully growing a business. I did it for a little over a year. I think I did 15 of his monthly seminars, and it just really changed the way that I approached my business. It was incredibly helpful. So if you're trying to find an actual way to organize the response to COVID and the growth beyond COVID, I cannot highly enough recommend it. It's a 4-fee program, but it's very reasonable in my opinion, and absolutely worth the investment.
Great, thank you, Brian. We do have, I have a question that was typed into the chat for Brandi and you, Brian, wanting to know if you personally handle your own social media. And yeah, I happen to know that you both do. What have you found to be the most successful of the most common? And then they listed email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you know, whichever one. And also, how often do you send out your messages?
So yes, I do handle my own social media. It's not something that I can outsource because it takes away the personalized approach and the experience in which I'm creating at Studio Luxe. It would not be personal to my clientele. It is a daily, I'm posting daily, oftentimes anywhere from, I don't know, 3 to 15 times a day, depending on what's happening, whether it's specifically with my business, other businesses I'm partnering with, or just in general in community information, because we are a resource center in addition to what it is that I offer. I have found that all forms of social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, I use all of them simultaneously, and they all pertain to a different audience, whether it's a different demographic or age group. So active on all platforms, and it has changed how I do business. It's something I did from day one. However, it's more of a requirement. For anybody who's intimidated by social media, I encourage you to get acclimated and use it, because it is a huge resource and asset. It leads to conversations that you may not be able to have face-to-face, not just because of COVID, but because people sometimes are not as comfortable asking the question or asking for a service, etc.
So I spend about $30,000 to $40,000 a year on social media. The primary places I put those dollars are into MailChimp at $200 a month, and then boosting Facebook ads.
Wow.
Now, Instagram gets a passive co-boost out of MailChimp, and I also co-boost my postings onto Facebook. I don't manage Instagram. I have somebody in my organization, a younger person who's starting to tackle that. We've come and gone in the past. There's a presence because it costs posts. I know Instagram's a great platform. I'm getting too old to get a handle on all these things as they develop and they're there, and I don't know what to do about that. I do handle the messaging, and like you, Brandi, for years it was 2 to 3 hours once a week, because I send out an email every week, as many of you know, and I would write entire stories. I felt like I needed to give out the dream in order to warrant people reading, and it really worked. And when I hit that wall, I drew back a little bit. I still do the emails, but that level of personal engagement that some of you saw years ago isn't there anymore. And I miss that. There's nobody else who can do it. And I've had to shift, as my business has grown and my responsibilities have grown in other areas, I've had to pull back. And it's one of the regrets I have about where I am vis-a-vis the business. But that authentic personal voice is so important. One key little hack that's really great, they have both groups and pages for businesses. I think it was the groups were the old one, they're still there, and then the pages are the one where you can build promotions and all these things and events and all that. There's a lot more there, and that's really where you're spending your money. But one of the secrets on that is that if you do have a Facebook presence, every time you post and put something up, if you don't know this, go and click on the likers. You'll have comments if you're lucky. Then additionally, it'll say, you have 25 likers or 200 or 2,000 likers if you really get a home run. Click on that where it'll give those names. And down the right-hand side, it gives you the chance to invite them to like your page. It doesn't cost anything. And I've done that religiously for the last 5 or 6 years since I discovered that. We're at 45,000 Facebook fans today, and it's primarily because of that effort, which takes time. But what happens is that then when you do post, organically more people see that posting. And while I still spend a lot of money boosting, you know, it's not like a lot of people are seeing my material without me having to necessarily pay for them to see that. But social media is critical. And the other piece of the puzzle is that I've spent probably 1/10 of what I would have spent if I tried to use traditional media. And as much as I like to support the local paper, the reality is I can't afford, and I never could afford, to pay for print or any other type of media other than in collaborative stuff through Miles's office with Laura and others, you know. But doing it on my own, I just would have long ago run out of money if I tried to do it with traditional media, unfortunately.
Great. So thank you both. I have some thoughts to add about social media, but we are reaching the end of our hour. So I guess I'll just sum it up to say, if you are going to jump into social media, just be careful to know your audience and to really only play on platforms where your audience lives and plays themselves. So I just thank you, all of you, for being part of the group today. Thank you so much, Miles and Brandi and Brian, for being here. Thank you, Carlton and Ginger, for hosting us and for keeping things running behind the scenes. And thank you to all of you who have participated today. We are recording this, so if you missed any part of it or you want to go back and watch it again, we'll have it available on our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to pick that link up from Facebook. And this has been just a little taste of what is coming in October. And we're very excited to get rolling forward on that. It'll be a hybrid event, so we'll be able to do it both in person, or if you can't, you know, leave the shop or whatever, you'll be able to watch it online. It's going to be a great event this year. I think we're going to have great speakers, and it'll be good to be actually in person again. And I'm just very, very excited about it. And you can expect more of the same for that event. We're going to do one more of these mini symposiums in August. So watch your email, that'll be coming. And if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me or to Carlton at the chamber, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you so much. If you would like to stay on and chit chat a little bit, we will leave the meeting open to chat with each other for a little networking if you'd like, but if you need to move on with your day, we definitely want to respect that too. And we just want to wish you a great afternoon and a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you.